We share these conversations to encourage spirit-filled ecumenical dialogue and deeper theological reflection. While our discussions partially draw from the life and teachings of the Evangelical Orthodox Church, our words are personal and are not to be understood as formal positions of the EOC. Christian faith should be embodied. So join Christ's one holy apostolic church wherever his body is found. With that established, on with the show.
This year marks the 1700th anniversary of the Nicene Creed, a confession of faith that has survived despite the many ruptures and divisions Christians have experienced since its inception. Born out of the early church's struggle to articulate the mystery of Christ and the unity of God in the face of heresy, the Creed was first shaped at the Council of Nicaea in 325 and deepened at Constantinople in 381. It became a shared anchor for Orthodox, Catholic, and many Protestant traditions, even as its interpretation and use have reflected the fractures and hopes of Christian history. In this conversation, I'll sit down with Bishop Jakob Palm to explore not just the theological contours of the Creed, but its personal resonance, how it shapes his life as a bishop, a husband, a father, and a friend. We'll reflect on the Creed's role in church unity, its enduring beauty, and the tensions it still holds, and ask what it means to confess faith in one God, one Lord, one church, in a world that desperately longs for healing. Welcome to the City of Bridges podcast. I'm Deacon Aaron Monroe, and I am sitting here with Bishop Jakob Palm. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Hi there, Deacon Aaron. Thanks for welcoming me into this space. My name is Jakob, and I serve as bishop at Holy Covenant Evangelical Orthodox Church here in Saskatoon. And have done that for the last 4 years almost. I was ordained to the priesthood in 2011 and to the diaconate in 2007. I am an immigrant from Sweden, where I grew up, and I am a husband of my wife Ashley, and we have 2 children, Elias and Nora. Mm-hmm. And we live here and serve here in Saskatoon in River Heights, North Park.
Awesome. Yeah, so your name has come up in almost every episode. Someone has mentioned, oh, this was what Bishop Jakob said, or that was what Bishop Jakob said. So it's nice to finally have you on an episode so that people can hear a little bit of your perspective and get to know you a little bit. So we are, as we've said in the intro, going to discuss the Nicene Creed since it's the 1700th anniversary. And so obviously within our liturgy that we use every Sunday, we generally will confess the Nicene Creed, sometimes the Apostles' Creed, but more often this creed. So did you have anything to add as we kind of start out here?
No, I think that's great. I think it's very, very pertinent to lift the creed at this time. Faith and Order and the World Council of Churches are gathering in El Natron, Egypt, just starting Thursday, to highlight the creed and have long and deep conversations about it. And the more I think we can highlight the creed, the better. So I'm very happy to engage in this conversation.
For sure. Yeah, no, the last episode we had a conversation with Kimball McMillan, and over the years, it's something that has come up between him and I in conversation over and over again is that we can be assured that we have unity with those who confess this creed.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So I guess we'll go into the pre-prepared questions here, and we've kind of divided them into a few different sections. So this one is personal and pastoral reflections.
Yeah.
So we'll start out here. How does the Nicene Creed shape your prayer life and your sense of identity as a bishop, husband, and father?
Yeah, I mean, what the creed does beyond, the recital in the liturgy, which is as much about knowing who we are and what we believe and learning that. I mean, some churches, they sing the creed because it's easier to remember. I think is a big thing. And you enter into worship. It's like it's a point of worship to offer this confession. Some churches recite in speech the creed. And that's what we do at Holy Covenant. And but all that to say is that when the creed becomes part of your inner life, rather than just something kind of separate or something you just kind of learn intellectually, but it starts to grow as part of your being. And this is what I believe. That's I think when it has like a transformative power. And it's interesting because it starts with we believe. So it starts out with acknowledging that we are not alone. And we are not constituted individually as alone, but we implies togetherness, fellowship, and communion. And then the second word, believe, acknowledges that we have faith in someone, and we don't know in terms of like maybe the intellectual part. Like we can know some things, but it's a faith component here, which implies a mystery. And so we say we believe. And that, just those two words actually shapes my life. Every day is really an act of faith. And so the creed is built like that. Every little word in the creed is not random. It's prayed and thought through as to create a whole that can stand against the forces of division. And so it actually is shaped as a tool for living a life of integrity, or like a constituted life, a life out of a foundation. And so it, of course, described the doctrine of the Trinity and the humanity and divinity of Christ and the Holy Spirit and the Church and the kingdom of heaven. But it's this trajectory, right, where we have creation and the creative act of the Trinity together. It moves on into the humanity and divinity of Christ and Christ's action and atonement action for and in the world, and it looks beyond like what is coming in fulfillment. And so the creed in itself is also this salvation story, which I'm trying to unpack in my own life too, and how I pray and how I believe and act.
Yeah. So like saying that that each day is like an act of faith, it's like saying the creed helps you to see in a what's interesting is it's simple, but also it contains a description of everything. So it's not that simple, but it's like But one thing it does say is life is worth living.
Yes.
Because this, we believe, is true, right?
Yeah, it gives you a foundation, and it gives a continuity to rely on. Like you don't have to start from scratch every single time,
Right?
and so there is a foundation there.
Yeah. Okay. So when you recite the creed during the liturgy, what part, either now or maybe over the course of your life, has stirred you most deeply, and why?
Yeah, I think to choose a part, it's tough because it comes as a whole. But throughout the years, and I've been reciting the creed since I could walk, right?
Yeah.
And first in Sweden, and then in English when I moved to Canada. Throughout my life, I think the one sentence that has really been highlighted for me is "His kingdom shall have no end." And I don't know exactly why that has been highlighted, but that's a sentence that always has stood out to me as a child and as an adult. But I think it testifies to this great hope.
Yeah.
That there is life, there is growth, there is healing, and there's salvation, and hope and joy and peace in the world, and we haven't seen the fullness of that yet.
Exactly. Yeah. It's only just beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I would imagine that for certain people who recite the creed and are, actively reciting it in faith, however you want to say it, that as they mature and grow and change different aspects of it, they have to wrestle with.
Yeah.
I know when I first came to Holy Covenant, I was very confused about different theology aspects, and so the creed was like a sore point for me.
Oh yeah.
It was difficult to swallow, but it changed me rather than the other way around. So that's good. Have you ever wrestled? So this kind of gets to what I was talking about, with a line in the creed, either intellectually or spiritually. And if so, what did that struggle have to teach you?
Yeah, I mean, because of being so familiar with the creed and having kind of almost been born into the practice of reciting it on Sundays and learning it in catechism, like youth catechism and things like that. I don't know if I've had that active intellectual struggle. I'm doing quotation marks now here. But I have found that I have struggled with the church's contention about the creed.
As in like
and so it's, for instance, the filioque edition, right?
Yeah.
And I have, in my role as a leader in the church, had to contend with that and enter into the sadness actually of that. And to try to understand like why that is such a point of contention, and more so in the past. There's actually some more recent development that it's not such a big deal anymore. But that still has to be rectified in the life of the church, of course. But so there's been contention in the surrounding church, but not really in the creed for me, like in itself, if that makes sense.
Right. So the creed feels firm to you. It's just sort of the goings on in terms of, contention caused by division around differences.
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't wager, and I don't, but if I did, I would wager that it would be very hard to improve the creed.
Right. Yeah. No.
And I say that with a chuckle because it's kind of like it's pretty much, close to perfect. So if there's such a thing.
Yeah. No, it would be, my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I should clarify too, and because I'm not against churches who try to establish like a vision statement or this is what we believe or
Sure.
like confessional points or values.
Yeah.
That's great. But I am of the understanding and the persuasion that those should not replace the creed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to describe, say, the convictions of your local church, but then to say, and this is for all time and for the whole church.
Right.
That's a different kind of question, and so even just administratively, it makes sense that it would have happened very early on.
Yeah.
Right. How would you explain the creed to someone who doesn't know much about its use or they don't use it in their church?
Yeah, so the reality is that in many churches that are, thriving, good, living churches, the creed is not a part of their expression of worship, and the creed is not recited regularly. In some contexts, it's not remembered at all.
Mm-hmm.
And to someone from, say, a circumstance like that, or for someone that is curious about the way of Jesus and Christianity, I would probably say that the creed gives a very comprehensive introduction to what Christianity is about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it frames the story of Christianity in a pretty succinct way. And it presents the core essential beliefs of the one church. And in a society where a lot is about saving time, that's pretty appealing.
Yeah,
Or
it is relatively succinct.
Right. And so if you have that starting point of the creed, and maybe you're starting to read the scriptures a little bit, I think that it's just a good way to start. Mm-hmm. In churches that do not use the creed, I'd encourage them to do so, because it really brings this foundation back to the expression of worship and what is our story.
Yeah, and I would maybe add, and this might scare some people to say, that if what you major on, like really the hills that you will die on, aren't in this creed, you might ask yourself at least, why?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say, like, my experience was in churches that I grew up in, more often than not, if the creed was brought up, it was the Apostles' Creed that was raised. And this creed, sadly, I wasn't even aware of until maybe my 30s, which is maybe sounds odd to you, right? But that's how it is. So, all right. So moving on to our next section here under the heading Theological and Ecclesial Depth. So what do you believe is the most misunderstood aspect of the Nicene Creed from your experience and observations so far?
Well, I think a misunderstood aspect is that it's this old document that's not relevant to today's Christian. Like, that's an idea that's out there. And like, why should we be beholden to something that was agreed upon 1700 years ago? And so that's a misunderstood aspect, I think, of not maybe fully understand what the nature of the creed is.
Yeah, as though its intention were to just kind of deal with a local, time-bound, small issue or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Because truth has staying power, right? That's not to say that, truth is determined just by longevity, but it sure gives an indication of truth, what's true and not. And so if you have something that's still being recited by most of the church, 1700 years later, then that is probably not just a document that was written 1700 years ago by the initiative of an emperor that had maybe ulterior motives or whatnot. Yeah, it's probably just not that. And I mean, that also blends in this misunderstanding with Emperor Constantine and like, people have all kinds of opinions about all of that.
Yeah.
Often misunderstood, I think.
And I think overly simplistic ideas, in the sense that just, if we wrote off the creed because of errors that participants made or that Constantine made, then I don't think we would receive anything from history whatsoever. Everybody's made errors.
Yeah, and I mean, I think any honest inquiry or any honest pursuit of truth will lead to uncovery of history, right? It's just kind of, if you are actually interested in truth, well, then you are eventually going to look back at what happened in the past.
You get the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah, for sure. Yes, no, I think that's a good point. How do you interpret the phrase, one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, in light of our fractured ecclesial landscape? Just a softball question for you.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to answer this in a succinct way, but to say something, we confess that the church is one. And so the church is actually not divided. It's actually not multiple. It's one, it's holy, it's Catholic and Apostolic. So it's one, as in one organism or one body. It is holy in terms of it's set apart and sanctified for a specific purpose. One purpose, actually, in essence. It's Catholic, that is, it is universal, not only geographically, but in terms of its constitution. And so it reaches everywhere in all aspects of reality. So it's Catholic because it exists on the physical and in the spiritual worlds and realms. And it's apostolic. It's sent out for a specific message.
It's on mission.
Yeah. And so the church, which is one, is all those different things, or attributes or descriptors. When we say that it's fractured, I believe that's a good word, or we say it's broken.
Yeah.
Because of different things that has happened throughout history, we can say, but primarily it's broken because of sin. It's sin, Satan, and death that fractures, the church and has this consequence of brokenness. And so, in one way, it might be necessary for the church to be broken in order for Christ to heal it, in a sense. And that's a mystery, but that's probably the way of the cross in terms of like exposure and vulnerability and honesty of our situation as church. Like we need to realize that yes, we are one church, but it's broken, and we need to live through that brokenness.
Yeah. No, as you're talking, I'm thinking about something I heard someone say about how, in a sense, death is required for repentance to enable repentance.
Yeah.
So in a sense, though it's not an ultimate good, it has a temporary purpose to allow us to face our situation and turn back to God. And so I'm thinking, as you're saying, there's some sense in which the church might need to be broken. And I'm thinking, I'm broken,
right?
But I'm also one person, but I'm broken. I'm fractured in some sense. And so every relationship we have on this earth is in some sense not what it should or could be.
Right. Yeah, like we haven't reached this telos or fulfillment of all we're meant to be. But death in Jesus Christ is, of course, like dealt with. And so it's not the end. But there's life and resurrection in the movement and walk of faith in Christ, right? So it's like, if we need that process as a person, well, I think the church probably needs that process too. And so when we say that, like we interpret the phrase to kind of go back more specifically to the question, like one holy Catholic apostolic. Yes, we are one, but we are also in this kind of state of being fractured or being broken unto resurrection. So
there's a humbling that goes on, and obviously if we don't have that, we are very good at becoming triumphalistic and self-righteous.
Yeah.
I think there's evidence, some evidence of that, sadly. Okay, this is another tricky one. This one's tricky. So, in as much as you can explain this, what does it mean to confess God from God, light from light, in a world increasingly skeptical of metaphysical language?
Yes, I mean, at the time when this was written, and this belongs to the Nicaea Council, like this particular phrase, it's a defense against Arianism, which is a defense against this notion that Jesus Christ was less, or was created at some point in time by the Father, and therefore there was a time when Jesus was not. And so it created this kind of subordinate little reality of Jesus in relation to the Father. So that was Arius kind of claiming that made sense. And so when this line of the Creed is formulated, is a defense against that claim, saying that no, Jesus is of the same essence as the Father, and not subordinate in terms of anything or anything like that. So at the time, that probably made more sense using that language, because this was the hot debate at the time.
Right.
And so like the Gnostics too have kind of dabbed into the homoousios language and started to use that, and so the defenders of Christian orthodoxy, so the great Cappadocians and those church fathers, they start to use words to explain to defend the faith.
It's like a philosophical language.
Right. And so in one way, that language maybe doesn't make sense in the same way today, because, well, people are not generally concerned about Arianism.
And also our metaphysics are a little thin and
right,
underdeveloped.
Yeah, and I think there is a vast difference just in general terms how to do public discourse, how to go about creating beauty, and all those things that are very different than from now. And,
right.
And so in today's language, this term needs some explanation, and it needs some unpacking, and it needs catechesis in order for people to kind of appreciate.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, this is why they said this. And if you only recite the creed and you come in, with no background of Christianity, you just hear these words.
Yeah,
it's like, what do you mean, God from God, or
yes,
like, isn't there one God? And so, but it's also an opportunity, because the creed then presents these questions to the seeker, right?
Yeah, and it's not just philosophical, it's the church describing what they observe in reality, I believe.
Yeah.
Could you, this isn't in my questions, but can we try to give a short explanation of what is the problem with believing that Jesus is created or subordinate, or, as some say, a God? What's the problem with that? I mean, other than it not being true, what happens downstream of that, as far as you can tell?
Yeah, I mean, what comes into the fore then is an eternal inequality, which in turn compromises freedom and love. And so if God, which we believe is a communion of love, and totally free, and because there is freedom, there is love, and vice versa kind of thing. If there is a subordination of the Son to the Father that is preset, because Jesus voluntarily subordinates himself to the will of the Father. But if it's preset, and if there's no freedom, it will become very hard eventually downstream, as you say, to say that God is a God of love, of communion. So
and it probably affects human institutions as a result too, which bad ideas like this probably do affect our modern institutions. But if it were the preeminent belief,
and I mean, I don't seek to be controversial, but in one way, I think we can look at another religion and see some effects of what you're suggesting, what that looks like.
That type of belief, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Yeah. It wasn't for nothing anyway that they put that line there.
No, it's Trinity. It's not monotheistic in terms of it's different than Judaism, right?
Sure, and we'll go into this we've got an episode kind of mapped out in the future. We want to talk about hierarchy and how hierarchy within Christianity isn't what you think that word means.
That would be very, very good to explore.
Yeah, it's much more beautiful than top-down leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you see the creed as a boundary marker or a bridge or both?
Well, probably both. And I say that because I know I'm supposed to say that.
What do you mean?
According to my own conscience.
Okay.
But I would probably, in my gut, resonate more towards the boundary marker. Because if somebody agrees and consents to and confesses the creed, then that tells me something about where they belong.
Right. You're on the same page. Yeah.
Like we share at least this language, and we might interpret it a little bit different, but we have a common ground here where we can explore and we can start from and dialogue from. And
like first principles in philosophy. Yeah. If we can't agree on this, then where do we go from here?
But I also believe that the creed is a bridge in terms of more to the things I said before, where it can be a very pedagogical tool to explain what the faith is about.
So a bridge to catechesis, learning.
Yeah, I mean, in our context, we use the creed as the foundation of our catechesis. Like, we go in catechesis, we go through the creed and then take the segments of the creed out and flesh out the larger story that's that contained in there. So so in that way, it's a bridge
for sure.
And but as a boundary marker, it's more like that. Do you confess this or do you not?
Yeah. I wonder if it was a bridge in a sense in the time that it's formulated, where if there are churches that are kind of wobbly, they can now take this home and say, these few things we need to be on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, and maybe this is a good bridge into the ecumenical kind of landscape of this, but there are churches who's are non-confessional. They don't require any confession. And to me, that journey becomes very, very long then. Like, if you don't agree to this, to the creed, then, or can confess that in good conscience, then I know that a relationship with you will be of a different character.
Yeah. It's gonna be difficult to have depth and to know if we're speaking the same language. And
so of course you act with charity towards all, and you can pray and those kinds of things, but you just know that this may take a very long time.
Yes. Okay. So on to our next larger category. This is sociological and anthropological dimensions. How do cultural and historical contexts shape the way that different churches live out the creed, as far as you can tell? Maybe we can't speak to this like in an all-encompassing fashion, but have you noticed any differences?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at past history, there has been a time where it came with a high cost to confess the creed, in terms of like persecution, identifying if you're a Christian or not. And there, of course, has been persecution, very sadly, between churches too, depending on different creedal statements and that kind of thing. I today, and this is maybe more what the question is about, I think there's this temptation to change fundamental doctrinal and dogmatic beliefs that the church hold to better fit the current context, according to how we evaluate the needs of the context. So we give more, what do you say, more impetus and power to the current context than to the witness of the past. And I think that the creed often gets forgotten in, churches that's a heart to serve and for social justice, to do something. The creed is often forgotten because, like, why is that relevant? We get caught up in the ministry of the church, or how can we impact the neighborhood for good?
Right. Yeah. We create a dichotomy between faith and action, or faith and works again.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Yeah. There's a great temptation to do that. And of course, we really need to know who we are, particularly when we are in the fray. Mm-hmm. When the going gets hard and you minister to different people that are really vulnerable and suffering, you really need to know who you are.
Yeah. No, I think that there's in some circles where they prioritize action over, let's say, the content of our beliefs, or why would we act a certain way. They take for granted that their ethic comes from their heart and it's spontaneously generated and it didn't come from anywhere. But I think that that's foolish, in the sense that the church and God through his church has shaped our societies and our cultures so much that we now take for granted that it makes sense to love our enemy. But that's not an obvious belief. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I think if you disconnect yourself from the creed and from scripture and from, like you say, those dogmatic, firm beliefs, over time, your ethic probably loses its way. Maybe it's not in one generation, maybe it's in 2 or 3, but probably eventually it's not gonna resemble what it was.
No, it's it's not. It's gonna slide towards whatever direction the force comes from. So
yeah. So what role do rituals, icons, and embodied practices play in reinforcing or challenging creedal unity?
Yeah, so if we look at the creed as this foundational statement that the church by and large agrees upon. I mean, there's been some suggestions from different directions in terms of gender language and
sure,
whatnot. But it's still agreed upon as it was written or finalized in 381, pretty much across the board.
Yeah.
Actually, in my studies now, I have a survey out to local leaders here in Saskatoon, where one of the questions is, do you agree with the Nicene Creed? Do you confess it to be true? And there's a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is, yes, I agree. And everybody that's the answer so far has a 1 or a 2.
Interesting.
So that's interesting. And this is from churches does not use the creed regularly or...
Sure.
But anyway, so I think the rituals, icons, and embodied practices in terms of reinforcing creedal unity. So if the creed is this foundation, then the icons and embodied practices and rituals provides a context for how to lift this foundation up and highlight it in its proper place. Because the creed is not in and of itself, like it needs a context.
Yeah, by itself it's linguistic.
Yeah. And it is a document.
Yeah.
Like that belongs in history kind of thing. And so it needs this contextual embodiment by a living church in order to reach its telos, or its intent, or its fulfillment. And so when we talk about creedal unity, we actually need to speak or sing it together.
Yeah, it's not so much like, for example, if all it was that survey and people going 1, 2, 1, that's not it.
No.
By itself, right?
No.
That's like, it's a secret, you know.
And so that context or embodiment of the, say, ideas of the creed, that is foundational for its purpose.
Yeah. So do you find in interacting with other believers, especially maybe outside of the traditional context of Orthodoxy or Catholicism, do you find people are other pastors, for example, turned off by the rituals and the icons and so forth? Or is there sort of a, I wish we could, or what's the general sentiment as far as you know?
Well,
you know, from a unity standpoint.
Yeah, of course, there's going to be a broad range, a spectrum here again, and some people in the evangelical Protestant circumstance are, of course, very, very interested and in the sacramental life of the church and in the theology of beauty and icons and all of those things. And to some, it's a big offense. It's ritualistic. It's religious in the bad sense.
Right.
And but overall, I think, and this is just anecdotal that I say this in my encounters with people. Overall, there seems to be an increased curiosity about the history of the church and where we actually come from. And I think that is probably a result of the great unmooring that has happened since, I'll say, the last 100 years.
Yeah, there seems to be an increased appetite for grounding, which I suppose is the opposite of unmooring. But it's like, what is something, like you say, what is rich, what is beautiful, what has depth? Why did we ever stop doing that?
Yeah, and just the comfort of getting offered something as a gift that you know intrinsically is good, and you don't have to go on this 20-year hunt of research yourself and make a billion gazillion choices to find.
Yeah.
But it's given, and you realize in your gut that this is something good.
Yeah. Did you ever read Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton?
Yes.
Yeah. There's this thing where he's kind of describing himself intellectually putting together the ideal religion or something, and then at the end he realizes it's just Christianity, it's just the church, it's just Orthodoxy.
Yes.
You know, and he's gone to all this effort to come up with something unique and great, and it already is.
Yeah, and I don't want to disparage or frown upon the process of learning. Like it's so important, and actually it's very important in terms of handing down the faith. We need to rediscover, but sometimes it's just nice to not have to choose all the time.
Yeah. Like you often hear in the culture these stories of people that they travel all over the world and different countries, and they explore every religion on the planet, and it's like they have this burden on them to kind of discover truth for the first time or something, or invent true religion from the ground up. You know, that sounds exhausting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next heading here we've got is church politics and ecumenical realities. So what are the biggest political or institutional obstacles to creedal unity among Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox churches today, as far as you can tell? I know our knowledge is limited, but from your perspective,
it's going to be a limited scope, obviously, and for full disclosure here, I'm a sinner, and so my scope is limited. And my own sin obstructs, pure vision, comprehension, wisdom, those kind of. So not only do we have obstacles within that we need to live out in a state of repentance, hopefully, as children of God, learning. As best as we can in humility. So that's probably the main obstacle, because the ecumenical journey begins in the heart of the person. It's a process of salvation, actually. If we unpack this enough, we will discover that. And so the unity that we seek as church, and that we already have in Christ, is more of a peeling back the layers of the obstacles than it is about, I think, organizational effectiveness or political astuteness. Or
administrative decisions.
And governance models. In the worldly aspect. And often I think the ecumenical process gets lost in those areas. And so the political and institutional obstacles are those in and of themselves.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
It's almost like caring too much about those aspects becomes an obstacle in and of itself. And the real obstacle, I think, like you've said, is us, in a sense, like our hearts, our...
If we look at the witnesses and the martyrs that's gone before us, and in terms of the witness they lived, like the ecumenical witness, and living and dying for the sake of the love of Christ and the union of the church, it's almost always a full-on sacrifice. And if we are prepared to offer that, then these other things would not be as much of an obstacle, I think. But we are muddled by and bogged down by ulterior motives and.
That seems like a tall order, and it seems right at the same time. Yeah.
But more practically, maybe just to frame it, language is for sure a problem, and so
like speaking past one another.
Yeah, so like we use different words meaning the same thing in the church.
Yeah,
a lot. One example is when, for instance, if an evangelical person is describing how to follow and become like Jesus, often the word is discipleship. And in a Roman Catholic context, that word would be sanctification. And in an Orthodox context, that word would be theosis.
Right.
And if we don't know the meaning, the core meaning of those different words, and I think often those words, we mean the same thing, to become like Christ or be in union with him, then, so language becomes a problem.
Yeah. You know, I think you're right. Like they might assume a slightly different mechanism, but the aim is the same. I think you're right. Yeah, for sure. So have you experienced a moment of profound unity with Christians from another tradition, one that seemed to transcend doctrinal divides?
Yes.
Next question. Can you describe, because of course the scary thing about a question like that is, do you mean you just kind of swept the doctrine onto the ground?
Right now, a couple of times I've experienced that, and common to those experiences was that it was I'm using the word gut a lot, but it was a guttural kind of experience where you just know that this is true. You can't really explain how you've come to know that this is true and what your experience is good and true. Like it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
But you just know in your being that it does.
That sounds mystical.
So if we put like a label on it, it's a mystical experience that goes then beyond rationale in a sense, and maybe another word to describe it is like encounter, or you have this encounter with God and the presence of God, that the other stuff becomes somewhat, it moves out of purview. I don't know if that makes sense. This
also sounds like almost like the mask is dropped between people, right? Those things which are maybe a bit of a pretense, a bit of protection, And I think most Christians have probably experienced this, but it's very easy to forget about it as well. And go back into your corner.
Yeah, and I think worth mentioning too is that a couple of those experiences, what happened was outside of the established liturgical order.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little left field,
Yeah.
Not in a noisy or disturbing way, but it was not like part of the preset order. The order was there, and so that it's not really part of the order in a way, but it was a little extra,
Yeah. Yeah, I think we see throughout Scripture examples of the Spirit working this way.
Yeah, and but if you don't have an established order of worship, how would you know if it's out of order?
Yeah. In contrast,
right?
Peter understood what was happening with Cornelius's household was unique. Yeah. How do you see the Filioque controversy today? As a theological rift, a historical wound, or a reconcilable difference?
I see it as all of those things, and it's I think a nice word choice to say it's a rift and a wound, as well as a reconcilable difference, because in all honesty, I'm not sure if it was actually the Filioque which was the main contributor to the division that happened, or the brokenness that happened in the church, the schism, to use maybe the best word, but rather the historical events that happened a bit after, and with the Fourth Crusade and so on, the sacking of Constantinople, and Lord have mercy. But a lot has happened since then, and as the Christian witness has continued in spite of its brokenness, I think the language has been clarified between the East and the West.
Yeah.
The political reality has perhaps softened a bit, even though more recent historical events has kind of made things harder again. And I'm thinking particularly about Russia here.
Yes.
So it's the Filioque controversy, I think, is a little bit of the top of the iceberg, but it would still be very nice if that could be healed,
right?
if that makes sense, because it might lead to some other healing as well.
So, practically speaking, how could it be? So, with those in the West primarily being used to saying the creed one way, and those in the East another. So, who compromises, and what is the compromise? And like it for those, I guess, for those uninitiated and don't know what we're saying, like, what is this word? Can you maybe give a quick summary of what phrase we're talking about?
Yeah, so Filioque, that means "and the Son."
Mm-hmm.
So the question at hand that we're discussing is if the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, or from the Father and the Son.
Right. So the original formulation was from the Father.
Yeah.
And then, so this would be the creed that we use.
Yep.
And then the Catholic formulation, primarily after, what's the king?
Charlemagne.
Charlemagne was "and the Son,"
Yep.
which, depending on who you talk to, resulted in a lot of theological divergence.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's that. So the question is, how do you reconcile that in sort of Byzantine Catholic churches, Ukrainian Catholic churches? They would use the original creed.
Yeah.
And then next door at the Roman church, they're using the other creed.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a couple of like practical, diplomatical way you can go about this. And so, say if you're at ecumenical gathering and you essentially agree upon the creed, right? Except this one, one thing, then half the people stay silent. During that little
one
phrase. And so that's not total agreement, yes, but it very much is still agreement, and we're working on this piece here, and so as long as the church is working on it, I think we're in okay situation. It's when we say, let's not work on it and just go our separate ways.
Sure.
That's the danger. And so there's like diplomatic compromises and solutions, quotation mark, so to speak, for when in the process when we work on things like this.
Yeah.
But eventually, maybe the hope is to have a creed that everybody can say together. Because it's such a foundational piece of the Christian identity. And so diversity is, of course, a necessity for unity. But there needs to be building blocks for our identity. And I think the creed is one of those building blocks. Like the essentials are contained in there. And so it'd be nice with agreement and not like diversity.
It almost feels like diversity isn't the church's problem right now.
Right. We have diversity in so many ways.
We have lots of that.
Yeah.
Could you ever foresee a situation where, because, we were talking about, you couldn't see a better formulation of a statement on the faith, describing the whole faith in summation. Could you ever see a moment where there were phrases put or added to the creed in order to explain what "and the Son" means, so that the East is comfortable with that phrase? Because obviously there are theological ways of understanding that phrase that are historically true, I think. But then there are ways of understanding which are dangerous, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, and I think if we look at the risks involved, I think there's less risk in the original, version.
Yeah.
Or in the original, rather.
Yeah.
And then I think the solution to this is not so much to arrive at a common theology as it is to take responsibility, a pastoral responsibility. And that pastoral responsibility belongs to the Bishop of Rome. And so it would be to me, and I mean, I'm just a very little... But to me, it would say something very, very profound if the Bishop of Rome would say, we relent to the East in this matter, and I as the Bishop of Rome, first among equals, will lead by example in terms of not enforcing,
Wouldn't that
our
be
understanding.
something? Yeah.
And so that would also then act as evidence for the call of the Bishop of Rome to be a pastor for the pastors of the church. And so, in terms of the ecumenical reality and like where now for church unity, like a thing like that would just it'd be amazing, I think, as well as a common date for Easter and like those kinds of things.
Well, we can hope we can hope for such, for sure. I think we've covered the last question as well, which was, what would it take practically and spiritually for churches to move toward a shared confession of faith again? So we've kind of covered a discussion of the state of individual hearts and the state of the hearts of various churches, and whether it's confessing our sin and or working on formulations of the creed or whatever it is. There's some work to be done, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I think it is important to remember that this unity piece, or the creedal piece, which, if we confess it in truth and with honesty, leads to unity. It begins in the person and in the immediate. So it begins with having that coffee with another Christian, as well as with somebody who's not a believer. But it's not rocket science in that sense.
No, I pay a fair amount of attention to what's going on in different corners of the church, whether we're talking Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, whatnot. And one thing that hurts me most is when I hear a particular Christian major on the minors, or what I believe are the minors, and kind of dig in their heels and essentially say, not on my watch, about something which isn't actually part of the great tradition, so to speak, but that essentially in their ignorance they believe is. And so to break down those walls, it seems to me to be a need for God's mercy, a need for the miraculous, a need for the softening of the Holy Spirit in our hearts, as opposed to intellectual argumentation or, like you say, documents signed between certain leaders. If a large majority of the members are stubborn and immovable and inflexible and unwilling to learn from love.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like we cannot invent unity in the church. Like the unity in the church is already there. Like there's one church, as we said.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be reinvented. What needs to be done is the acknowledgement and the confessing of of sin, and to unravel the brokenness, and to ask forgiveness and to forgive. Like that's the work I think that the church needs to do.
Agreed. So is there anything that you'd like to say to wrap up this conversation about the 1700th anniversary of the Nicene Creed?
Well, I am looking forward to listening into the conference, and to see what's being treated there, and maybe more how people speak.
Right.
Actually, and so that will be interesting. But I would like to encourage anybody listening to this to take a look at the Nicene Creed and explore the mysteries contained there, because the Creed offers this really foundational beginning and end to what the way of Jesus is about. And so I just want to encourage anybody who listens to do that.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for listening. We've been trying to add an additional sort of comment, encouraging people to share the podcast with their friends and family, whoever might benefit from a particular episode, and to do whatever you can just to kind of get the word out for us. So thank you very much, and have a good day.